Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into a 7th grade topic, compound interest. Now, if you're new to my channel, I'll be putting timecodes in for this video in the description box below, so use that to skip ahead to whatever part of the video you think is most interesting. As always, if you have any questions about what we see today, or even your own homework, you can always put it in the comment box below, or visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. Today's video will have 3 parts, so leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and let's get started. If you're watching this video, I'm going to assume that you know at least what interest is and you have an idea of what simple interest is. If neither one of those 2 things are true, I recommend pausing this video. In this video, I will not be going into those 2 in depth. However, I will be referencing them to see a good comparison of simple interest versus compound interest. But if you have no idea what either simple interest is or even interest is, you're gonna have a hard time understanding. So pause this video and check out my video on simple interest that you can find right up here. And that will break down what you need to know about what interest is, and at the very least give you a good basic understanding of what simple interest is. Now that we have that out of the way, let's figure out what compound interest is. Now imagine it was some magical way of getting free money, and all you had to do was nothing. If you can just get free money, who wouldn't love that? Well, we talked about that magical way in my last video, and that magical way was interest. And we discussed simple interest as a way of getting free money by just lending out your money. You're not actually working or anything. You're just getting this money back because you pretty much lent money out for an extended period of time. However, simple interest, because it was simple, wasn't all that impressive, right? You want more money. Let's say we want to turn the magic up a notch. Simple interest, we found out, gave you the same interest amount regardless of how much time you've left your money there. Because simple interest is calculated off of that initial principal that is deposited, as your money grows, the interest payment does not change. Now, yes, it's free money, so that's great. However, we want more money. We want to not settle for the same payment for the rest of our lives. Is there a way for us to turn the magic up a notch? The answer to that question? Compound interest. Let's go back to our example with our help of our friend Batman. Imagine you had a ton of money like Batman and you put it in the bank. And remember our bank example from last video, we said that because you kept it there, you're going to get a certain amount of money every period, whether it be week, month, year, but it was simple interest, so it was the same amount. That's boring. We want more. We want to spice up the magic a little bit. That's where compound interest comes into play. Unlike simple interest, that's calculated only on the initial principal, compound interest is calculated on the initial principal and any interest that is given. What does that mean? Well, that means that the simple payment that stays constant now increases the more money that you get from interest. So as you're getting more interest, the amount that interest is calculated on grows as well. Therefore, you get more interest. And as you leave the money in there, you see it keeps growing and growing and growing. Therefore, you're going to get more and more and more interest. Now that we've seen a visual to grasp the concept of compound interest, let's look at how it compares numerically to simple interest. How much better is compound interest in the long term compared to simple interest? Let's say you had the chance to go to 2 separate banks. Your first bank, Bank 1, is going to give you simple interest, while your second bank, Bank 2, is going to give you compound interest. Now, both banks are also going to give you 10% interest rate. So we don't have to worry about the difference in interest there. We're just going to be comparing simple versus compound. In both banks, you deposit $1,000 and you want to see just how good compound interest is compared to simple interest. So the initial amount is $1,000 in both banks. After year 1, with 10% simple interest, you're going to have now in your bank account $1,100. And in bank 2, with 10% compound interest, you're going to have $1,100 as well. Now for this example, I should say this is 10% annual interest rate compounded annually. Just need to know that I'll talk about it more when we break down the actual formula behind all these, but I want to show the numbers so you have an idea of just how crazy compound interest is compared to simple interest. But you're looking at this and you're seeing no difference between simple and compound interest. They're both, after the first year, are going to give you the same amount of money. But remember, compound interest uses the interest you get in order to give you more money. So yes, in the beginning, it's pretty on par with simple interest. However, after the first year, you start seeing slow changes, and as time goes on, you could potentially see some massive differences. So let's continue. After year 2, remember, simple interest looks at the initial deposit, your principal. This is going to mean that your interest payment is the same. So after year 2, you got another $100, bringing your total to $1,200. However, Bank 2 has compound interest, so you're going to bring your total to $1,210. Let's skip ahead a little bit to year 10. So for Bank 1 with 10% simple interest, remember, all the interest payments are going to be the same. You're going to be looking at $2,000 in your account. Now, this is still pretty incredible. You didn't do anything. You just put $1,000 in there, waited 10 years, and it doubled. That is very impressive. That's free money, right? However, Bank 2 is going to have you looking at your total being $2,500 and roughly $94. That is a decent difference. So it started off pretty much the same. You had a $10 difference after year 2, but you see, going all the way to 10 years, you have almost $600 difference just from putting it in a bank with compound interest. Let's say we jump another 10 years and look at 20 years. Now you're going to have in the Bank 1 a total of $3,000. Now you've tripled your money by simply letting it stay there. However, Bank 2, you're going to have a total of $6,727 roughly. You've more than doubled what you would have gotten in your simple interest Bank 1. But we're not done yet. Let's move all the way to 30 years. Let's say we left the money untouched for 30 years in these two banks. You're going to have a whopping $4,000 after the end of 30 years in your Bank 1 because of all the interest it got. However, Bank 2, because of the compound interest, you're going to be looking at $17,400 and roughly $49. This is over 4 times as much as you would have gotten in Bank 1. This is crazy. This is free money from just leaving it there for large periods of time. Compound interest, taking into account how much interest you earned and then giving you more interest on top of that, you see it's no comparison as to your simple interest counterpart. Now, what if I said that compound interest, even with the same interest rate, can give you over $20,000 with your initial amount being the same? How does that work? Well, let's look at our formula for compound interest and break it down to see where the magic really happens. This is going to be our formula for compound interest. Notice it looks pretty different from the formula we use for simple interest. So let's break down what these parts are. Well, in this case, A is going to be the amount. So you can think of total amount, right? Total amount. That's everything in your account, your initial principal plus all the interest that you've gotten. This is the total amount. P is going to be your principal, just like simple interest, principal. R is going to be your rate, your interest rate that they're offering at that bank or whatever establishment it is. T is going to be time, just like it was previously. And now you have N, which N is going to be the number of times interest is compounded. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, remember in the number example I just showed you, I told you very briefly that it was compounded annually. Well, that means that it's only going to be compounded once per year. But what if you compound it, let's say, quarterly? That's how many times per year? 4 times per year. Semi-annually, twice per year. You can even do monthly, 12 times per year. You can even do weekly, 52 times per year, daily, 365 times a year. N is going to be how many times it's compounded within a given year. So these are the components for your compound interest formula. But one thing I really want you to note is A. Remember our interest formula from simple interest. That formula was to find the amount of interest we got. It was just the interest. If you want to find the total amount, you add that interest to your principal. But we were just trying to figure out interest. This time you have a formula that gives you the entire amount. But what are you going to do if you need to find just your interest earned? Well, you're going to take this total amount and subtract your initial principal. Everything else after principal is going to be your interest. So I just want you to recognize that. This A right here is the total amount, whereas in our previous video on simple interest, we found interest directly. So we're gonna look at two really easy examples to see, one, how we got that $17,000 outcome that we just talked about, and two, how can we get more money by looking at a different amount of compounding, a different value for this N. So for example one, we're going to be looking at that bank 2 example at the 30-year mark. Remember, we had $1,000 that we put in our bank initially. We had a 10% annual interest rate. We only compounded annually, so that's once per year. And we had a time period of 30 years that we left the money in the bank. So we're gonna plug all of that into this interest formula up here and figure out exactly how we got that $17,000 outcome. So we're gonna start with 1,000 being our P times 1 plus our rate. Now our rate is 10%. Well, what's 10% as a decimal? We're gonna have 0.1, right? And we divide, so this is 0.1. We're gonna divide by N. What is N again? N is gonna be the number of times you're compounding. Well, this is gonna be annually, so once per year. So 0.1 divided by 1. Now we have to raise it to the N times time. Now, this is going to be 1 times the amount of time, which is 30 here. So as N increases, you see that you're going to be multiplying by a higher number of compounding. So this is just going to be 1 for this example. So we can simplify this to 1,000 times 1 plus 0.1, because 0.1 divided by 1 is just going to give us 0.1. And this is going to be raised to the 30th power, because 1 times 30 is just 30. So 1 plus 0.1 gives us 1,000 times 1.1. Remember, you always have to do what's inside your parentheses first. Remember, order of operations. Don't get ahead of yourself. If you still struggle with order of operations, no worries. I have a video that actually talks about order of operations using something called GEMA, G-E-M-A. I don't really care about PEDMAs or PEMDAS, whatever you want to call it. I now subscribe to something called GEMA. So if you're curious about GEMA and why I think it's a little bit better than PEDMAs or PEMDAS, then check it out. I'll put it up here as well. But for this, make sure you're doing order of operations. So inside your parentheses first, and then you're going to raise this to the 30th power. The next thing you want to do is figure out what this exponent is, 1.1 to the 30th power. Now, you could put all of this in your calculator. You don't necessarily have to do it step by step, but if you don't have a calculator, I recommend following your order of operations. If you do, then you can skip ahead and you'll find out that you get 17,449.40, and this is some more numbers, but let's say we round it to 0.40. So this is how we figure out how much we have totally in our account at the end of 30 years if we compound annually with an annual interest rate of 10%, initial principal of $1,000. But we want to see how can we get even more money. We want to see what do we have to do in order to get that $20,000 outcome. So let's look at example 2. So the only difference that we have in example 2 is how much we're going to be compounding. So instead of compounding annually once a year, we're going to be compounding weekly. Now there's some things that compound even more than that, but we're only going to be looking at weekly for this example. And there are about 52 weeks in a year, so N is going to be 52. So let's plug all this into our formula and see what we get. We're going to have 1,000 times 1 plus the same 0.1, right? Over 52 this time, raised to the 52 and times the 30 years. So we're first gonna have to focus on what's inside our parentheses. So we're gonna reduce this to 1,000 times, now you can just put all of that into your calculator if you want, or you can just do it one at a time, but this inside is going to be 1.00, let's say 2. Let's just round that to 0.002. It's a little bit longer than that, but we're just gonna round it to 0.002. Now we still have to figure out what's our exponent. This 52 times 30, what is that? Well, that's gonna be 1,560. So when you raise 1.002 to the 1,560th power, you get something like this. 1,000 times 22.5759. Let's just say 22.5759. Now you just multiply that by 1,000 and you're gonna get a rough estimate. Now we round it here, so it's not exact, but you're gonna see roughly 22,575.90 cents. This is a rough estimate, but this is a lot more than that 17,000. So you see, not only are we compounding, which is more than simple interest, but we're compounding at a very high rate of 52 times in a given year. And every time compound interest happens, you're going to be adding to the amount that you're calculating your interest on. So you can think of simple interest being your interest on top of principal, and your compound interest is going to be interest on top of interest on top of principal. So you see, in the long run, simple interest is not going to give you much different. However, compound interest can get very, very, very big. So I hope you're following to the examples, and I hope you see that although not simple, compound interest doesn't necessarily have to be difficult. And if you're willing to let your money stay there for an extended period of time, you can get way more of it in the long run. But if you have any question about what we started today, or even your own homework, remember you can always put in the comment box below, or visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you haven't done so already, remember to leave that like. It really helps the channel by letting YouTube know that you found this video helpful. And if you found it helpful, so can someone else. So leave a like, smash the subscribe, hit the notification bell, and while you're at it, share this video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your homework. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this is another session of Tutor Me Sempai.